Hello and welcome back to Crafted by Corie. If you're new, I'm Corie. Welcome to my channel. If you are returning, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you more than I can tell you. Today is the minis challenge. There's going to be a whole playlist full of inspiration. More about that in just a little bit. For now, let's go ahead and get right on into the crafting. DIY number one. All right, for this project, I have this little easel sign from the Dollar Tree and my Stars and Stripes Forever little transfer from Chocature. I'm just using the backing from some contact paper to protect my surface. That is candy apple red and then cadet chalk paste. I'm having a memory lapse right there on what it was called. But I am going to, oh my goodness, I'm at a loss for words today. I don't know what's going on. Fuzz, that's what I'm doing. I'm fuzzing my little transfer so that it isn't overly sticky when I go to use it, and later I'll be able to actually remove it from my surface, which is always a bonus, right? So once I had it all fuzzed, I am lining it up on my little easel sign and gonna just press it down so it's ready to go. I was just trying to decide which color I wanted to start with here. And I've got my cadet blue and using my little squeegee. I'm trying to work quickly because I want to make sure that it doesn't dry in my transfer or I'll have an issue pulling it up. I ultimately decided that I was just going to lift it as I went. That way I wouldn't have to worry about it because I have learned the hard way with the transfers and the chalk paste because it dries super fast, which is good, but also not so good when you're trying to do a more complex picture. So just a word of the wise, if you are taking your time with it, you might want to just kind of lift your design as you go, so that you have the best results in the end. Now, if you don't have Chocature transfers, you don't have to use something like this. You could use a stencil. You could Mod Podge something on here. You could use decals. There are so many different ways that you can decorate these signs. I had wiped away my red paint and then with my little baby wipe, and then I decided this needed something else. So I'm literally taking it back out of the baby wipe because it was not it was definitely a little chunk of paint there and I didn't want to waste it, and I don't know. I kind of like the way this looks, but it's also not perfect. But let me know what you think. As I mentioned earlier, this is the minis challenge. There is a whole playlist full of inspiration. I hope you'll go and check that out. The link is in my description box. DIY number two. All right, this is a little hanging shelf from the Dollar Tree. It's actually got two little shelves in here and a cord with a little ring for hanging it. I'm setting that stuff aside because I am just after the wood that's in here, and I'm going to be making a little sign with this. I have another transfer. Again, as I said, you don't have to use transfers. You could use stencils, or you could hand letter things, or you could Mod Podge something. So there are a lot of different ways of decorating with words and other sorts of things. But I've pulled out, you can see these little wood stars from my little stash that they came from the Dollar Tree as well, in a pack of a whole bunch of different sizes and shapes of things. And this napkin is something from a pack that I picked up at my local grocery store just recently. I have done at least one other craft with these napkins. I think it's just one. But I had Mod Podged it in a way that made the whole thing kind of wrinkle, which ended up being great for that particular project. I don't want that to happen this time, so I am going to use a different method. I'm just kind of figuring out how I'm going to want this laid out, but I do know that I want to paint this because when I Mod Podge that napkin, it ends up being a little bit translucent. So I want to make sure I have that white background so my white stripes look white and not the yellowish tone from the wood. Using my heat gun to dry the paint. This is my Adirondack White by Home Decor. It is a plaid product just like Waverly. And now I've got my Mod Podge. This happens to be a matte Mod Podge, but I don't think it really matters what kind of Mod Podge you use. You could use whatever you'd like. So giving this a really good coat just on the top surface with the Mod Podge. I'm going to dry it again, and then it'll be ready to put down my napkin. So once I've got it nice and dry, I'm going to go ahead and line it up where I want it. I'm kind of pressing it down a little bit. It's not really going to do anything because it's not really tacky any longer, but I just got it set, and now I've got my easy press, my mini easy press that I'm going to plug in and get turned on. If you don't have an easy press, an iron will work just fine. I just happen to have this little guy in my craft room, so that is what I'm using. So while I'm waiting for that to heat up, I thought I would go ahead and start prepping my stars. It took me a minute to actually find this gold chalk paste that I wanted to use. So in the meantime, my little easy press was heated up. So I'm literally just pressing this on just like you would an iron. You want to be careful that you don't scorch the napkin. In all honesty, I should have put down a piece of parchment paper over it. Didn't occur to me at the time. I realized towards the end of what I was doing, I was like, ooh, I should have put some parchment paper down because I did feel like I was going to start scorching it. But as you can see, it's nice and adhered now. I wanted to rip off the excess napkin. I probably could have just used a pair of scissors, but I'm trying to be careful. This is not wet, obviously, and so it doesn't tear as easily as it would if I had used the wet Mod Podge. So I was just trying to be careful. For the excess, I am using a piece of sandpaper. Now, I certainly could have done that to begin with, but there was just a lot of excess napkin and it would have been in the way, which is why I chose to tear it off first and then came in with the sandpaper to clean it up. Now that that's on there, I'm going to go ahead and seal it with some Mod Podge over the top. If you weren't going to be putting anything over top of this, it probably wouldn't be as necessary because it was definitely nicely adhered, but I am putting something over this with my transfer, so I want to make sure it's not going to damage the napkin when I do that. So making sure that the Mod Podge is sealing it in, that'll also help protect that surface. I used my heat gun again, I'm just kind of making sure it's nice and dry, fuzzed my little transfer again, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply it to my piece here. I'm going to use the pattern and the stripes to my advantage, making sure that it's nice and dry, because again, I don't want my transfer to stick to this either. So, but using the pattern to my advantage to just get this all nice and lined up, I'm making sure that it's got the same amount of space, top and bottom. This was my first test. Yes, it came off, no problem. So just gonna go ahead and get that lined up. Once I was satisfied with the location there, I went ahead and grabbed my gold chalk paste. And this is in just one of the little sample, it's supposed to be single-use packets. I tend to get more than a single use out of them. I just kind of seal them up again when I'm done with them, and I stick them back in my stash. So that's the way I've been doing it. I will fold it over several times and then tape it up just to keep the paste moist. So I went ahead and peeled that up. I know it's really hard to see it on camera here, but it actually looks really cute in person. I'm using that same chalk paste because I wanted my stars to match the same color. So I'm using that same chalk paste to paint all my little stars and just using a little brush to do that. I had started just using the excess that was on that little squeegee, but it's definitely easier to paint these with a brush. Now just using some hot glue once these are dry, and again the chalk paste dries super fast, which was another reason why I wanted to use it on the stars, not just because it was going to match the middle there, but going ahead and applying a tiny little bit of hot glue to the center there, and then covering up those holes that are in my wood, although they are covered up with the napkin now. They are still slightly visible, and there you go. I'm loving this. So now I decided I wanted to have a little stand for the back of it. So I've got these other little pieces that came out of the same little package that the stars had come out of. So those rectangular shapes. And then I have a couple of little mini wooden cubes from a pack from the Dollar Tree. And I am using them to kind of create an angled little backing. I don't know. I was making it up as I went here, you guys. So just trying to figure out how best to make this work. I knew I needed one piece that was going to be longer than the other in order to create a slant for the sign. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I think you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. But I'm applying these little wood cubes to the shorter piece right now. That's going to be the base. And just making sure that that's going to be there to support the longer piece. So I'm using glue on the edge and then also on the little, the edge of the cube too, where it's joining with the longer rectangular piece. You could do this with popsicle sticks. You know, you don't have to have these tiny little pieces. You could just cut a couple of popsicle sticks and do it that way. There are actually a lot of different ways that you can make backings for signs. I'm going to be doing something different in a little bit on a different project that you'll see. So you'll have another option, which is actually a lot less involved. So you can see here, I'm going ahead and attaching it. I'm using that long edge and then the cube edge. And so it's just going to kind of create an angled stand. So hopefully you can see what I'm talking about now. Let me know what you think. DIY number 3. These are Tera Cotta Pots from the Dollar Tree. I'm only going to be using one for this project, so I'm setting the other one aside. And now I'm grabbing out some more of this backing from some contact paper that I had put down on my surface. And I was like, you know what? It's a non-stick paper, so I might as well use that. Waste not, want not, right? Rather than just throwing it away. Gonna put it to good use. So I am painting the little pot with my Adirondack white chalk paint. I started painting the inner lip just for it to look finished, and then I just couldn't help myself. Ended up painting the entire inside. Totally not necessary, but I know it's there, and I just, like I said, can't help myself sometimes. I just want everything to be nice and finished. So I went ahead and completed the painting. Now, the great thing about these terracotta pots, they suck up all of the moisture. So by the time I was done painting the inside, the outside was basically dry. So these dry very, very quickly. Something to keep in mind as you're painting them. Because if you, for whatever reason, don't want it to dry too fast, you're gonna have to work real quick. So I've got my crimson chalk paint here that I'm going to use to create some stripes. I've got a little flat, somewhat stiff angled brush there that I'm going to use. I did end up making these a little bit wider, these stripes, wider than my initial intent, but I still like the way that it came out. I am not looking for these to be perfect, and clearly they are not. I'm looking for this to be a little bit more, I keep wanting to say rustic, but I don't know if that's the right term, but I don't know. I wanted them to be imperfect. So now I've got my ocean chalk paint, and you can see me thinking. I'm thinking about how to create stars around the top rim. I guess that's a rim of my pot, the upper edge of the pot. With the blue serving as the background. So at first I was like, well, maybe I can just use my paintbrush and, paint the, outline of the star with my paintbrush. And as I went, it wasn't quite right. And the more I tried to fix it, it wasn't working at all for me. So what I ultimately ended up doing is grabbing my pencil and drawing little stars on here that I would be able to kind of paint around. So I'm just trying to be careful not to have pencil lines going through the middle of my star. So I am kind of letting my pencil lift at the areas where it would intersect. Hopefully that makes sense. So I created a whole bunch of stars all around the outer upper edge here, and now I am using my paintbrush to just paint around those to the best of my ability. Still was not perfect, but again, I'm not looking for this to be perfect. I want it to have the charm of imperfection. I realized I can't go from left to right there because I was putting my hand in the paint that I just had applied to the upper rim there. So I'm just going from right to left instead, and that solved my problem. So once I got that all done, I was ready for my next step. I went into my stash and grabbed some greenery. This is just boxwood. I've got 2 little bunches of boxwood here. And then I grabbed a little flag from my stash as well. I decided that the boxwood was sitting a little bit too high. I started trying to take off the little individual pieces, but those were going to be too short. So I went ahead and put that back together, and I grabbed my wire cutters and just cut my little pick apart the way I normally do. And then I put all of those little individual pieces into the little flower pot. So I think they had 5 or 6 little stems on each bunch, and just arranged them in here so that they looked nice to my eye. And then I went ahead and dropped my flag back in here in just a minute too, once I had this all situated the way that I wanted it. Now, you don't have to use greenery. You could use flowers, you could use seashells, whatever you want to put in your little pot, completely up to you. But let me know what you think. And now it's time for a shout out timeout. Beautiful Crispbjorg from Iceland. I was so excited to see this. She does not have craft stores, you guys. So beautiful. And nice Tammy, beautiful projects, pretty Rose. Thank you all so much for sharing. I would love to give you a shout out as well. If you have interest, just send me an email at craftedbycorie@gmail.com. DIY number 4. All right, this last project, I have another transfer. Again, you can use a stencil, you could use decals. If you have something you see in a calendar that's got stars and stripes and something pretty, you could do that. You could print something off of your computer and Mod Podge it on here. So many different things you can do to create pieces for your tiered tray. But I did paint this piece. This is the other little shelf from that set. Painted it the Adirondack white chalk paint. Now I am using the chalk paste again in the same candy apple red that I used earlier. I was getting down to the dregs of this little single-use packet. I think this must be like the 3rd or 4th project that I've done with it, but went ahead and did that and peeling it away. So now I've got my red and white stripes. And then once I had that done, I am going to grab my ocean chalk paint and I'm going to create a background for this. It is super cute, just all white. I was just showing you I've got a flat, relatively stiff brush there that I'm going to use to help me draw these straight lines so that I can create the edges of the star, and then I will just fill everything else in blue. But I am doing my best to protect the integrity of the star itself and just making sure that I am going right along those edges and doing the best that I can to keep it straight. I opted not to put any kind of tape on it because I thought it probably would lift the chalk paste. The thing with the Chalk Couture chalk pastes, they are washable, so you can use your surfaces over and over again. So as I went here, it's funny. At this point, while I was doing my voiceover, I realized, or while I'm doing my voiceover, while I was editing, I realized that I didn't quite have that edge on that last side of the star completely right. It's a little bit lopsided, but hey, it gives it character. Of course, knowing myself, I will probably go back and correct it because you can see it's a little higher on the left side than it is on the left. So that is life. But I went ahead and got that all filled in. And now to cover up those holes again, I've got these little, I'm going to call them silver brads. They're silver and gold. They're little blingy, I'm calling them brads for lack of a better term, but just using a little bit of hot glue right on the hole. So I know that I'm going to have it nice and covered, and then placing what I'm calling brads right down on top to finish that off. Now, when I peeled this off, it did take away some of my paint on the back of my piece, and we all know that I like my pieces finished, so I tried to touch it up a little bit. You can also see I have some blue paint that bled in underneath my my work, so it's kind of messy. The blue was bleeding into the way. I finally decided I was just going to put some craft paper on the back and finish it that way. And that's also going to take care of the holes that I have visible on the back side of my piece. So ultimately, I decided this was the best way to finish this particular piece. So I've got that down with some hot glue. Just be careful. I had a little bit of hot glue that oozed out on the edge there and got my finger. But once I had it secured, I pulled out my self-healing mat, and I've got my X-Acto knife, and I'm just going to trim off the paper around each of those edges. I did kind of catch some of the side of my sign on the one side, so I just went back and touched it up with some more of the blue chalk paint once I had this all trimmed away. But just making it nice and neat and easy peasy. So now, as I mentioned, we're going to make a stand for this one now. I was trying to decide how I wanted to do it. I've got a bunch of these little wooden cubes from the Dollar Tree again. And ultimately, I just put a little bead of glue right across the bottom there. As I mentioned, this is a lot less involved than the other little stand I created before. That's it, and it actually worked quite well. I was pleased with the outcome. So let me know what you think of this one as well. And here we are with the final reveal. Okay, everybody, that's it for today. If you enjoyed the projects, remember to please give me a big thumbs up, leave me a comment, let me know which one was your favorite. And remember, this is part of the Minis Challenge. There's a whole playlist full of inspiration. I hope that you'll go and give all of those crafters some love. Check out everything that they've created. The link is in my description box for the playlist. And until the next time, be well, be kind, and make it a great day. Thank you so much for watching. Take good care. Bye.